Thank you for downloading from Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Support for this podcast comes from your generous gifts and donations. You can find out more about Ravi Zacharias and the team at www.rzim.org.
Is there anything beyond the grave? The Bible tells us there is, for Christ rose again from the dead. And even as he raised Lazarus, he wept at his grave, knew the sorrowing of death. But he raised Lazarus from the death and said, this is for the glory of God. And I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, if there is no resurrection, justice becomes a mockery, love becomes a mockery, meaning becomes a mockery. And that's why Job's most important question was, if a person die, will he or she live again? And I say to you, in Christian terms, the answer is yes, that Christ provides the answer in life beyond the grave.
Welcome back to Just Thinking with Ravi Zacharias. We may pursue pleasure, success, health, and wealth, but ultimately, we still come back to asking ourselves the question, what's it all for? Is it possible to find meaning in life apart from the reality of God? This week, Ravi has shared some powerful concepts such as how wonder, truth, and love work in harmony to create meaning. But as we'll find out today, there is still one more piece of the puzzle. Here's Ravi with the conclusion to his message titled, In Search of Meaning.
We're living in a time where racism is mounting. I know it. I've been on the receiving end of it. I've been on sides of it that are not funny at all. They're not happy feelings. I've had times when names were called. I've tried never to take it seriously and move on. You just go on. But I think 2 nights ago, some of you remember me mentioning the tragic statement, I'll never forget it, that deeply passionate statement by Arthur Ashe, whose biography is really worth reading. He said, as dreadful as this AIDS is in its devourment of my body, he said, nothing pained me more than the rejection I faced because who I was in my ethnicity and so on through life. I cannot think of words more painful for a dying man than to say that. And let me say this, God in his grand scheme of things, even if we disagree with each other, whatever the disagreement may be, even to the point of the truth we're talking here, reminds us that we have dignity because we are created in his image, and to love one another and cherish one another because of that image with which God has created us. What a lofty perception for you and for me. Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people. What he really meant was, I'm all right until you come along. And then bring a little bit of hell with you. In the terms of God, you and I can bring a little bit of heaven into each other's lives. But you see, we are bankrupt in the English language because love encompasses a lot. Even one word, but in the Greek there were 4. There was agape, meaning love of God. There was storge, meaning love of parent. There was phileo, meaning the love of a friend. There is eros, the love of sensuality consummated in the legitimacy of marriage. So there's agape, there's phileo, there's storge, and there's eros, all bundled up. And what God tells us, it is agape that binds all of these together. The love of God comes first, love horizontally with parent and fellow man and so on. So I tell you again, you start off with wonder, continue in truth, experience love, all wrapped up in the person of God. And finally, when we come to the closing moments of our life, as we see it all coming to an end, the question raised more than any others, what security is there now? Is there anything beyond the grave? The Bible tells us there is, for Christ rose again from the dead. And even as he raised Lazarus, he wept at his grave, knew the sorrowing of death. But he raised Lazarus from the death and said, this is for the glory of God. And I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, if there is no resurrection, justice becomes a mockery, love becomes a mockery, meaning becomes a mockery. And that's why Job's most important question was, if a person die, will he or she live again? And I say to you, in Christian terms, the answer is yes, that Christ provides the answer in life beyond the grave. I close for you with one poem that I read, a quotation, and then I'm through. Thank you so much for giving me the privilege of taking this time and speaking to you. Listen to these words. Hardy Shaul, who fought in Vietnam. Lord God, I have never spoken to you, but now I want to say, how do you do? You see, God, they told me you didn't exist. And like a fool, I believed all this. Last night from a shell hole, I saw your sky. I figured right then they had told me a lie. Had I taken time to see the things you made, I'd have known they weren't calling a spade a spade. I wonder, God, if you'll take my hand. Somehow I feel that you'll understand. Funny, I had to come to this hellish place before I had time to see your face. Well, I guess there isn't much more to say, but I'm sure glad, God, I met you today. I guess 0 hour will soon be here, but I'm not afraid since I know you're near. The signal, well, God, I'll have to go. I like you lots. I want you to know. Look now, this will be a horrible fight. Who knows, I may come to your house tonight. Though I wasn't friendly to you before, I wonder, God, if you'd wait at your door. Look, I'm crying. I'm shedding tears. I'll have to go now, God. Goodbye. Strange now since I met you. I'm not afraid to die. That poem led me to go to Vietnam. And in my mid-20s, I arrived in Vietnam, moving from American military base to military base, talking with the men and women there about the hope that lies beyond the grave, and saw hundreds of them make that same commitment, and across the country, several thousand. How is that? With these words, I sum it up for Malcolm Muggeridge. He says, I suppose, regard myself as a relatively successful man. People occasionally stare at me in the streets. That's fame. I can fairly easily earn enough money to qualify for admission to the higher slopes of the Internal Revenue. That's success. Furnished with money and a little fame, even the elderly, if they care to, may partake of trendy diversions. That's pleasure. It might happen once in a while that something I said or wrote was sufficiently heated for me to persuade myself that it represented a serious impact on our time. That's fulfillment. Yet I say to you, and I beg you to believe me, multiply these tiny triumphs by a million. Add them all together and they are nothing. Less than nothing. Indeed, a positive impediment measured against one draught of that living water Christ offers to the spiritually thirsty, irrespective of who or what they are. That, to me, in scriptural terms, brings that meaning. The hunger and thirst that is filled in Him who alone is the perpetual novelty. Thank you so much for giving me that hearing.
Those of you who have questions, please move to the microphones or look around for the 3x5 cards that are being passed out and write them down. And also, we can fill out the comment cards now and turn them in later. So let's move to a time of questions and answers facilitated.
Were you asking a question, ma'am?
Yes, Dr. Zacharias. First of all, thank you very much. You've deeply touched my life with your 2 speeches that I've heard you. I guess what I was wondering the most, or what intrigues me the most, as a man of your background, you've investigated, I'm sure, so many different religions. How did you come to stay with the Christian God or the God of Christianity? And I know that so many people ask themselves, can't I communicate directly with God? I can communicate directly with God, yet the Christian belief is that we need Jesus Christ. What are the connections there?
Very fair question and very sensitive, and I appreciate it. And if there's anyone of a different perspective, please bear with me. I'll do my best to answer it as sensitively as I can, because I think it is important to bear that in mind. Yes, there are many, many ways that are offered, but it is imperative to recognize that every way at some point claims exclusivity. The Christian faith has taken a very unfortunate hit, as if most people think the Christian faith is the only one that claims exclusivity. That is not true. Every major religion, you name any one of them, I'll be glad to respond to you. My field of study was world religions, and that's what I taught, world religions and philosophy. Every major religion in the world has a claim for exclusivity. Even Baha'ism, at a point, draws a line, draws a boundary, and which is supposed to be the most syncretistic of all. So, ma'am, the question then boils down to one of 2 things. How do I determine what is right? Do I determine it on the basis of sincerity? Is that alone sufficient, or is there a way of measuring truth? I was so impressed by Dr. Hugh Ross's comment that as far as he knows in his study of the various sacred texts around the world, the Christian scriptures are the only one that assert and ask you to test the philosophy, test the idea, because it says not everything is true. So what we need to do, as painful as it is to establish a procedure by which we come to the knowledge of the truth. Otherwise, a person with LSD in his or her veins may say, look, this is what brings me meaning. Why do I have to believe anything at all? Sincerity is a noble character, but a person can be sincerely very, very wrong. And it is important, as God has spoken to us in creation, as God has spoken to us in the Scriptures, as God has spoken to us in the incarnation of Christ, that He reveals to us that truth by definition is exclusive. Let me give you a simple illustration. I don't believe our problem is that there is only one way. I don't think that's the problem. No more than I think it's a problem of a man complains that he's only allowed to love one woman. I think you ought to thank God for the privilege of loving one. And there's a Spanish proverb that says, he who loves one has loved them all. He who loves many has loved none. I think there's a lot of truth to that statement. But I say this to you. If God had given us 10 ways, I want to challenge you, we would have wanted 11. If God had given us 1,000,000 ways, we would have wanted 1,000,000 plus one. So rather than complaining that there is only one way, why aren't we grateful that there is one way? Especially since He paid for it with the price of His own Son to bring you and me into that relationship. So I was raised in a country, Hinduism, for example, has 330 million gods in the pantheon of Hinduism. My ancestors were Hindus, Hindu priests in the south of India. And there are many noble things about that philosophy, but it's not monolithic. It's too detailed to go into. But I say to you that I found in the assertions, the life, and the evidence, and the total scheme of things that Christ's answers corresponded with reality, cohered as a system, and as I said to you last night, for the 4 questions of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, it bound those answers together and put my own fragmented life to test it in my own life because it was objectively true. So I say to you, as painful as it is, truth by definition is exclusive. You see, it's more possible for all religions to be wrong, but it's not possible for all of them to be right. It is more reasonable to say they're all wrong. It is a totally nonsensical statement to say they're all right. And how do we determine it? The methods of truth investigation are clear. And I believe in the person of Christ, you see that method well established.
Wonder, truth, love, and security. Those are the 4 components that God blends together to give us each true meaning and purpose. We hope the things Ravi shared in his message this week have reinvigorated your heart and mind. That was the conclusion of Ravi's message, In Search of Meaning. And he covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. This presentation is actually part of a larger collection of messages presented at the Ohio State University Veritas Forum. The full set includes the message we heard this week, the Q&A session that followed Ravi's presentation, and a recorded interview from a radio call-in program with Ravi and astrophysicist Hugh Ross. The material contained is excellent for anyone wanting to expand their faith and their intellect, or to get a grasp of what Christianity is all about. To order a copy of this complete series, be sure to call us at 1-800-448-6766. Our website is also a great place to find resources to help you in your search for meaning, such as Ravi's book titled, Recapture the Wonder. Visit us online at rzim.org. In Canada, that website is rzim.ca.
Just Thinking is a listener-supported radio ministry and is furnished by Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, Atlanta, Georgia.